The woman who promised to love me forever was about to destroy me, but she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the man she married. I'm Ethan Blackwell, 49 years old, and this is the story of how my wife of nearly 20 years thought she could outsmart me. It started with a phone call at 5:30 a.m., a call that wasn't meant for my ears. I've always been an early riser. 25 years in tech will do that to you. But that Tuesday morning, something felt different. The house was too quiet, except for the low murmur of Vanessa's voice coming from downstairs. My wife never took calls this early. Hell, she barely functioned before 7 a.m. and her first cup of coffee. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the top of the stairs. Vanessa was in the kitchen, pacing by the window, her voice hushed but urgent. He doesn't suspect anything yet. We're almost done. My blood went cold. 20 years of marriage, and I knew every tone in my wife's voice. This wasn't her work voice. This wasn't even her talking to her sister voice. This was different, secretive. Just a little longer, she continued. The paperwork should be ready by next week. I gripped the banister. Paperwork? What paperwork? I heard her footsteps coming toward the kitchen doorway. Quick thinking kicked in, a skill you develop after decades of solving problems under pressure. I quietly made my way back to the bedroom and slipped under the covers just as I heard her coming up the stairs. Morning, honey, I said, keeping my voice groggy as she slipped back under the covers. Morning, she replied, but her voice sounded strained. Sorry if I woke you. Early call from a client on the West Coast. First lie of the day, and it wasn't even 6 a.m. Everything okay? I asked, studying her face in the dim morning light. Just some investment restructuring. Nothing major, second lie. Vanessa worked in wealth management, sure, but she'd never taken calls this early for investment restructuring. Not in the 15 years she'd been at the firm. The rest of the morning played out like any other Tuesday. Coffee, shower, brief conversation about dinner plans. But something had shifted. I found myself watching her differently, noticing things I'd stopped paying attention to after 2 decades together. The way she kept her phone face down during breakfast. How she took it with her to the bathroom, something she'd never done before. The slight hesitation before she answered my questions. At 49, you learn to trust your instincts. And mine were screaming that something was very, very wrong. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into our joint banking accounts. Vanessa usually handled most of our finances. She was the expert after all. I trusted her. Maybe that was my first mistake. I pulled up our checking account first. Normal transactions, mortgage, utilities, groceries. Then I checked our savings. That's when I saw them. Transfers, small ones at first, $800 here, $1,200 there. Then they got bigger. $3,500, $5,000, $7,800. All of them going to an account I didn't recognize. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar. They'd been happening for 4 months. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Always on days when I was traveling for work or tied up in long meetings. The total came to just over $47,000. My hands were shaking as I printed out the statements. 47 grand, almost $50,000 of our money, moved without my knowledge or consent. Ethan, you're home early. Vanessa's voice made me jump. I minimized the browser window and turned around. Yeah, wrapped up the Johnson project ahead of schedule. I kept my voice casual. How was your day? She set her purse down and walked over to kiss my cheek. Busy, you know how it is. I watched her face carefully. Actually, I was just checking our accounts, making sure we're on track for the vacation fund. For just a split second, her smile faltered. Oh, find anything interesting? Few transactions I didn't recognize. Transfers to some account ending in 7394? Now I had her full attention. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. Oh, that. I moved some money into a high-yield savings account. Better interest rate. I mentioned it to you a few weeks ago. She hadn't. I would have remembered, but I nodded anyway. Smart thinking. Which bank? Another pause. First National? They had a promotional rate. I made a mental note to call First National in the morning. Something told me they'd never heard of Vanessa Blackwell. The next morning, I called First National. They had no accounts under Vanessa's name. No accounts under my name either. No promotional high-yield savings accounts matching the account number I'd found. That afternoon, I installed monitoring software on our home computer. something I'd never thought I'd need to do with my own wife. But 20 years in IT teaches you that people lie. Data doesn't. It took 2 days to get my answer. I was in my home office when I heard her laptop chime with a new message. The monitoring software I'd installed captured everything. The message was from someone named G. Sullivan. Everything's set on my end. Just need her to sign the documents. You sure he won't figure it out? Vanessa's response made my blood boil. Ethan's too trusting. 20 years of marriage, and he still believes everything I tell him. He won't know what hit him until it's too late. G. Sullivan. And you're sure about the asset total? Vanessa, around $890,000 liquid, plus the house. He's got his 401k and some stock options, but I can't touch those. Still, we're looking at close to $1,200,000 total. G. Sullivan. Not bad for a tech nerd. My lawyer says with no prenup, you should get at least half, maybe more if we play it right. My wife was planning to divorce me, and she was working with someone named G. Sullivan to maximize how much she could take. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was stupid. I took a screenshot of the conversation, then started digging deeper into G. Sullivan. 30 minutes of research told me everything I needed to know. Garrett Sullivan, 42, freelance financial advisor, also, according to his LinkedIn profile, recently divorced himself. And according to the photos on his Instagram account, he'd been having dinner with my wife at least 6 times in the past month. I leaned back in my chair and almost laughed. After everything we'd built together, everything we'd shared, Vanessa was throwing it all away for some smooth-talking financial advisor who probably saw her as an easy mark. But if she wanted to play games with our assets, I was about to show her what 25 years of strategic thinking could do. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Vanessa, listening to her breathe, wondering how long she'd been planning this. How long had she been lying to my face? How long had she been playing the loving wife while plotting to take everything I'd worked for? At 6 a.m., I got up and went to my office. I had work to do. First, I called my college roommate, Benjamin Cross. Ben had become a forensic accountant, specializing in financial fraud cases. If anyone could help me protect my assets, it was him. Ethan, why are you calling so early? What's wrong? Ben, I need your help. And I need you to keep this between us. I explained everything. The suspicious transfers, the conversation I'd intercepted, Garrett Sullivan. Ben listened without interrupting. How much time do you think you have? He asked when I finished. Based on what I overheard, maybe a week. 2 at most, that's enough. But we need to move fast. Can you get to my office this morning? I'll be there. The next morning, I told Vanessa I had an early client meeting. Another lie to add to the pile we were both building. Ben's office was downtown, in one of those glass towers that made you feel important just walking through the lobby. He was waiting for me with coffee and a thick folder of documents. Okay, here's the situation, he said, spreading papers across his conference table. In Ohio, you're in an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets get divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. The key is proving what's separate property versus marital property. He pulled out a legal pad covered in his handwriting. Good news, your 401k is partially protected. Any contributions you made before marriage stay yours. Stock options depend on when they were granted and when they vest. What about the house? That's trickier. You bought it together, both names on the deed. But, he smiled, if you can prove she's been misappropriating marital funds, that changes things. I showed him the bank statements and screenshots. Ben's eyebrows went up. This is good, really good. She's been systematically moving money without your consent. That's financial misconduct. A judge won't look kindly on that. So what do? Ben leaned forward. We protect what we can and we document everything. I'm talking about creating a paper trail that shows every penny she moved, when she moved it, and where it went. Over the next 4 hours, Ben walked me through a strategy that was absolutely brilliant. We set up a revocable trust for my assets, perfectly legal as long as it was done before any divorce proceedings began. We moved my individual investment accounts into the trust. We documented every suspicious transaction Vanessa had made. Ben explained. The key is that everything we're doing is legal and ethical. We're not hiding assets. We're protecting them from someone who's already been misappropriating funds. By noon, I had moved roughly $680,000 into protected accounts. Not bad for a morning's work. But the best part, Vanessa wouldn't know until it was too late. I got home that evening to find Vanessa in an unusually good mood. She was humming in the kitchen, making dinner, acting like the perfect wife. "Good day?" I asked, hanging up my jacket. "Very good. I think we should talk about our future, Ethan. Here it comes." She served dinner, my favorite chicken parmesan, and poured wine. The whole production felt like a last meal. "I've been thinking," she said, cutting into her chicken with surgical precision. "We should probably update our financial planning. Make sure we're prepared for retirement. What did you have in mind?" "Well, I've been talking to some colleagues about estate planning, tax optimization, that sort of thing." She reached for her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I had some documents drawn up. Just basic stuff to streamline our assets." I opened the folder. "Power of attorney forms? Documents that would give her complete control over our finances. Papers that would essentially sign over everything I owned." "This seems pretty comprehensive," I said, flipping through the pages. "It's just to make things easier. You know how busy you get with work. This way I can handle everything financial without bothering you." I looked up at her. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold, calculating. This was the real Vanessa. I wondered how long she'd been hiding behind the mask of the loving wife. "You know what's funny?" I said, setting the documents down. "I actually did some financial planning today, too." Her smile flickered. "Oh, yeah. Had a great conversation with Ben Cross. Remember Ben, my college roommate?" The color started draining from her face. "Turns out Ben's become quite the expert on asset protection, especially in cases involving financial misconduct." Vanessa's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. "I'm talking about $47,000 in unauthorized transfers. I'm talking about text messages between you and Garrett Sullivan. I'm talking about the fact that you've been planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for." The mask finally came off. Vanessa's face hardened, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw who she really was. "You were spying on me. I was protecting myself." "Good thing, too." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Ethan." "Actually, I do. See, while you were busy planning my financial destruction, I was busy making sure it couldn't happen." I opened the trust documents Ben had helped me prepare. "Revocable trust established this morning. Perfectly legal. All of my assets are now protected." Vanessa's eyes went wide as she read the papers. "You can't do this." "Already did. And the best part? I documented every illegal transfer you made. Every text message with your boyfriend. Every lie you told me." She tried one last manipulation. "Ethan, we can work this out. We don't have to destroy each other." "You're right," I said, standing up. "We don't, but you chose to start this war. I'm just finishing it." That night, Vanessa slept in the guest room. I lay in our bed, my bed now, and waited for the next move. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later. Vanessa was demanding 50% of all marital assets, spousal support, and exclusive use of the house. Her lawyer was asking for $8,000 a month in temporary support while the case was pending. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I called Harrison Steele, the divorce attorney Ben had recommended. Harrison had 25 years of experience and a reputation for being ruthless when the situation called for it. "Mr. Blackwell," Harrison said when I arrived at his office. Ben filled me in on the basics. "Show me what we're working with." I handed him the evidence file I'd compiled. Bank statements, text messages, screenshots, timeline documentation. Harrison reviewed everything with the thoroughness of a surgeon. "This is excellent work," he said finally. "Your wife made several critical errors. First, she moved marital assets without consent. Second, she failed to disclose her relationship with Mr. Sullivan. Third, she attempted to defraud you with those power of attorney documents." "What does that mean for the case?" Harrison leaned back in his leather chair. "It means we're not playing defense anymore. We're going on the attack." Within a week, we had filed our response to Vanessa's divorce petition. We were seeking dissolution of marriage based on her financial misconduct. We were demanding she return the $47,000 she had misappropriated, and we were asking for attorney's fees. But Harrison's masterstroke was the emergency motion we filed to freeze all of Vanessa's accounts pending a full financial audit. She can't spend what she stole if she can't access it, Harrison explained. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. Vanessa's lawyer, Preston Whitmore, was apparently some hotshot who specialized in high-asset divorce cases. He had a reputation for being aggressive and expensive. Perfect, let him be expensive. Let Vanessa burn through her resources, fighting a battle she couldn't win. The courthouse was one of those imposing buildings designed to make you feel small. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of place where justice supposedly lived. Vanessa was already there when I arrived, sitting next to Preston Whitmore. She looked nervous. Good. Duh. All rise for the Honorable Judge Coleman Hartford. Judge Hartford was probably in his 60s, with gray hair and the kind of stern expression that said he'd seen every trick in the book. He reviewed our filings with methodical precision. Mr. Whitmore, your client is seeking substantial financial support and asset division. However, Mr. Steele has presented evidence of financial misconduct. How do you respond? Whitmore stood up, straightening his expensive suit. Your Honor, my client was simply managing marital assets in good faith. Any transfers were for legitimate investment purposes. Investment purposes? Judge Hartford raised an eyebrow. Into an account controlled by Mr. Garrett Sullivan, with whom she's been having an extramarital relationship? I watched Vanessa's face go pale. Harrison had done his homework. Your Honor, Whitmore tried again, there's no evidence of any improper relationship. Actually, there is. Harrison stood up and handed a folder to the bailiff. Text messages, restaurant receipts, hotel records, all time-stamped and authenticated. The judge reviewed the documents. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. Mr. Whitmore, your client has been systematically moving marital assets while engaging in an extramarital affair with the recipient of those funds. That constitutes financial misconduct and potentially fraud. Your Honor, I'm granting the emergency motion to freeze Mrs. Blackwell's accounts pending a full audit. Furthermore, I'm ordering her to provide a complete accounting of all transferred funds within 30 days. The gavel came down with finality. Round one to me. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa tried to approach me. Ethan, please. We need to talk. Talk to my lawyer, I said, walking toward my car. This isn't over, she called after me. She was right, but she was losing, and we both knew it. 2 weeks later, Vanessa played her last card. And it was a doozy. I was at work when Harrison called. Ethan, we have a problem. Vanessa's filed a motion claiming you've been hiding assets offshore. She's got documentation that supposedly shows you've been moving money to foreign accounts. That's impossible. I haven't moved anything offshore. I know that. But she's got bank statements, transfer records, the works. This looks professional. My blood ran cold. You think they fabricated evidence? That's exactly what I think. But we need to prove it. Can you get to Ben's office this afternoon? 3 hours later, I was back in Ben's conference room, staring at copies of the documents Vanessa had submitted. They showed wire transfers totaling $340,000 to banks in the Cayman Islands. The transfers were dated over the past 6 months, all bearing my electronic signature. This is sophisticated, Ben said, examining the papers with a magnifying glass. But it's fake. How can you tell? Ben pointed to a series of numbers at the bottom of each page. See these routing codes? They're valid for Cayman banks, but the formatting is wrong. The U.S. banks that supposedly sent these wires use a different coding system for international transfers. He pulled out his laptop and started typing. More importantly, look at these timestamps. They show the transfers happening at 3:47 p.m. on March 15th. But according to your phone records, he pulled up another screen. You were in a client meeting from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. that day. There are 12 witnesses, so we can prove I didn't make these transfers? Better than that. We can prove who did. Ben's fingers flew over the keyboard. Digital documents always contain metadata. Hidden information about when they were created, what software was used, even what computer made them. The screen filled with technical details I didn't understand. But Ben's smile told me everything I needed to know. These documents were created on a computer registered to Sullivan Financial Consulting. They were made using a specific version of accounting software that's only available to licensed financial advisors. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Garrett Sullivan, more than that. The metadata shows these files were created last Tuesday at 11:23 p.m. Want to guess where Garrett Sullivan was last Tuesday night? I already knew the answer, but I let Ben tell me anyway. According to his credit card records, he was having dinner with your wife at Romano's, the same restaurant where they have been meeting for months. We had them. Not just for the divorce, but for fraud, forgery, potentially criminal charges. What's our next move? I asked. Ben closed his laptop and looked at me with the expression of a hunter who just cornered his prey. We destroy them. Harrison filed our response to Vanessa's allegations on a Friday afternoon. But this wasn't just a denial, it was a declaration of war. Our motion included Ben's forensic analysis of the fake documents. It included evidence that Garrett Sullivan had created them. It included proof that Vanessa and Garrett had worked together to fabricate evidence. Most importantly, it included a countersuit. We were now suing both Vanessa and Garrett for fraud, conspiracy, and perjury. The beauty of this approach, Harrison explained, is that we've shifted the entire dynamic. They're no longer trying to take your money. They're trying to stay out of prison. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. But on Monday, something interesting happened. Garrett Sullivan's lawyer called Harrison. His client wants to negotiate, Harrison told me over the phone. Apparently, Mr. Sullivan is now very eager to cooperate in exchange for immunity from prosecution. What's he offering? Everything. Documents showing how they planned this from the beginning. Text messages, financial records. He's even willing to testify about Vanessa's role in creating the fake evidence. It seemed Garrett Sullivan had discovered something that Vanessa apparently never learned. When you're caught red-handed, sometimes the smartest move is to save yourself. What about Vanessa? Radio silence from her attorney. But I suspect that's about to change. Harrison was right. Tuesday morning, Preston Whitmore called with a settlement offer. They're willing to walk away, Harrison told me. No spousal support, no asset division, no claims on the house. Vanessa keeps her personal accounts in her car. You keep everything else. And in exchange? Do you agree not to pursue criminal charges? I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. Counteroffer. She pays back the $47,000 she stole, plus attorney's fees. And she signs a non-disclosure agreement. I don't want her bad-mouthing me to our friends and colleagues. I'll run it by them. An hour later, Harrison called back. They accepted. Just like that, it was over. 20 years of marriage ended with a phone call and some paperwork. The final hearing was more of a formality than a trial. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table looking like a shadow of her former self. The confident, manipulative woman who had tried to destroy me was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and small. Judge Hartford reviewed the settlement agreement with his usual thoroughness. Mrs. Blackwell, do you understand that by signing this agreement, you're admitting to financial misconduct and fraud? Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. And you understand that you're waiving all claims to marital assets and spousal support? Yes, Your Honor. And you're agreeing to repay $47,000 plus legal fees totaling $23,500? Vanessa flinched at the number, but nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hartford signed the order. Marriage dissolved. Terms of settlement approved and entered. The gavel came down one final time. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa approached me one last time. She looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of her choices. Ethan, I said. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. We're done, Vanessa. You made your choice when you decided to steal from me. You made your choice when you planned to destroy me. Now live with the consequences. I walked away without looking back. 6 months later, I was sitting in my home office, the same office where I'd first discovered Vanessa's betrayal, working on a new project. The house felt different now, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Ben stopped by that evening with a bottle of bourbon and news about Vanessa. Thought you'd want to know, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Garrett Sullivan filed for bankruptcy last week. Turns out his financial consulting business was mostly fraud. Your wife picked a real winner. What about Vanessa? Working as a bank teller in Akron. Apparently, no investment firms want to hire someone with a fraud conviction on their record. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the $47,000 she stole. The months of lies. The fake documents. The attempt to destroy everything I'd worked for. The moment passed. You know what the funny thing is? I said, taking a sip of bourbon. She almost got away with it. If she'd been a little smarter, a little more patient, she might have taken me for everything. But she wasn't smarter, Ben pointed out. And that's what matters. He was right. In the end, Vanessa's greed and overconfidence had been her downfall. She'd thought she was dealing with a naive husband who trusted her completely. Instead, she'd underestimated someone with 25 years of experience solving complex problems under pressure. A year later, I was featured in a magazine article about financial fraud in divorce cases. The reporter asked me what advice I'd give to other men in similar situations. "Trust your instincts," I said. "If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't assume the person you married would never betray you. People change, circumstances change. Protect yourself. Any regrets?" The reporter asked. I thought about it for a moment. I regret that it came to this. I regret that someone I loved for 20 years was willing to destroy me for money. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret protecting what I worked for. What's next for you? I'm dating again. Slowly, carefully. But I'm not giving up on the idea of finding someone trustworthy, someone honest, someone who sees a partnership as something to build together, not something to take apart for profit. The article came out with the headline, "How One Man Saved His Fortune from a Fraudulent Wife." It got shared thousands of times on social media. I received dozens of emails from men in similar situations asking for advice. The message I always gave them was simple: document everything, trust your instincts, and never underestimate what someone will do when money is involved. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about finances or legal strategy. It was about human nature. It was about the fact that you can live with someone for 20 years and still not really know them. You can build a life together and discover that your partner was always planning to tear it down. That's a hard lesson to learn at 49, but it's better to learn it than to remain blind to it. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in my office again. But this time, I'm not alone. Her name is Catherine. She's 44, and she's a teacher. We met at a coffee shop 8 months ago. She's nothing like Vanessa. She's honest, straightforward, and she pays for her own coffee. We're taking things slow. Very slow, because at 50, you don't make the same mistakes twice. But that's a story for another day. For now, I'll leave you with this. If you're reading this story and something about it sounds familiar, if you're seeing signs that your partner might be planning something, don't ignore those feelings. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself. Because sometimes the person sleeping next to you is your greatest threat. And sometimes the best defense is a good offense. The war is over. I won. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.